Stand by. The vacuum tubes are warming up. This is a special live broadcast right here on Georgia Radio.
Well, I love a great story, and Shannon Singleton is filled with a bunch of them. She's one of our Georgia authors that we're celebrating on this authors feature. Shannon, how did you get into this? The books focus on your sons, Jalen and Ty, which I'm sure had a part to play in this, but I'm curious how you got into writing.
Well, I've always loved reading, and when I was little, in my middle school years, we had a creative writing class in Louisiana, and so that was my first time actually writing a story, and I just loved the descriptions and just everything about writing, and so that was planted a seed, as you could say, for what is now, my books and me being an author now. But that's where my love for writing started. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and you're writing stories for your two sons.
That's right, Jalen and Ty. Jalen and Ty are 6 years apart, and Jalen is like me. He loves to read and devour books. And when he was about in middle school, he kind of came to me and he said, "Mom, I don't really see myself in the books that I read. I don't see any African-American protagonist." And I ran into the same problem when I was younger and as an adult as well. So at that point, I just told him there was nothing really I could do. I just told him I was sorry. And then fast forward 10 years and I was laid off with the rest of the world when COVID hit. And I was teaching my youngest son, Ty, how to drive. And he started telling me, making excuses for not wanting to go out and drive. And so finally I asked him, "Dude, what's going on?" And he was like, "Mama, I don't want to get stopped by the cops and get killed." And that's when everything was happening with George Floyd. And so for me as a parent, it hurts not to be able to tell your kid that wouldn't happen to them. And so for about 2 weeks, I was depressed. And then finally I went to him and I talked to him about, when people do stuff like that, like they did to George Floyd, they want you to be scared and not exercise your right. And I told him that as just like any other American teenager, it's his right to learn how to drive and to drive around and to enjoy it. And I told him that's when people do things like that, they want you not to exercise your right. And it's just like letting the devil win. Will you let the devil win? Yes or no? And he said no. So then we went out that next day, and he's been driving ever since. That was 4 years ago. But I was trying to figure out as a parent, how can I help with the situation? And so I felt like I can combine my love of writing and my memories of my children to write stories where African-American children can see themselves early on positively in books, and also for everybody else to see them that, they're relatable just like any other ethnicity.
Yeah, and I'm curious on your books there with that you've written specifically for your sons. I'm curious, though, what the reception has been like, and, from other folks. I mean, not just other African-American kids, but I'm guessing they appeal to just about any kid.
Yeah, they do. I've enjoyed the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of parents. Like the first book, Quit Following Me, I'll give it away to the audience, but it's about my son's shadow. He didn't understand what a shadow was. And a lot of feedback I've gotten from parents is like, wow, I never thought about that. Or they'll relate to another story where their child was having an issue with something that they had to explain to them, and it's such a universal thing is when children grow and they're learning things, there's just certain things that as parents, we don't realize that, we need to talk to them about because we take it for granted. Right.
No, yeah, you're right. And I love this idea too of being intentional and reimagining the protagonist as a young African-American boy, or whatever the situation may be in the story of having this, be a young kid who happens to be black. It reminds me, Percival Everett, college professor, brilliant writer, has reimagined the story of Huck Finn from the idea that this guy James who happens to be enslaved
Mhm.
and going down the river with this boy has sort of rewritten the story from the perspective of James. And
Right.
that stuff you don't think about, but this is prevalent in a lot of literature where it's often a supporting role, or it's often a role that is designed to make the white protagonist, become the hero, an encourager, a silent encourager. And so what you're doing is you're just saying, hey, look, here's another alternative,
You're right.
which I think it's great. It's something that I don't think a lot of people who are not of color probably have thought about. What's the reaction that you've gotten on that end?
That's true. It's kind of like you said that a lot of people like, I never thought of it like that because, when it's not you that you don't, when it's not you that's in that position, you don't really realize how other people are being affected. And so it gives me a unique opportunity to not only draw attention to, African Americans, but I also want to partner with authors that are of other ethnicities other than African American, Asian, South American, because it's not just me, it's not just African Americans that are feeling like that. It's other ethnicities too. And it'd be great if children can have such a variety of ethnicities that they see in books growing up. And I think that would help also with the perceptions and the stereotypes that we have of the negative stereotypes that we have of other ethnicities as well.
Did you set out to do this, or was it just literally to write a book for your boys?
It was all intentional. It was, I want to do this. I want to make sure that, everybody's seen. A lot of people know, people that are African American know that when you dig into your own ancestry, like I'm a big ancestry buff, right?
Okay.
We can only go so far because of slavery. And so for me, these books mean to me is my descendants won't have to wonder what their great-great-grandfather did. They're going to have these books where they can see the interaction and like some of the day-to-day that goes on with my sons. Because those are the things that I wish I knew about my ancestors that I don't know.
And has this mission always been in your life, or is this something that sort of came up from this conversation that you had with your boys about books?
It's funny. It's funny how I believe in God. So it's funny how God drops these little nuggets here and there. And the second book in the series, I actually wrote that 20 years ago. Wow. And so I've hung on to, it's called Tickle Me Mommy. I hung on to that book and I kept it with me the whole time. So I feel like that seed was planted way back 20 years ago. I just didn't know the full plan of it. You know what I'm saying? The full breadth of it until now. And I just love my two sons so much that it's just, because all of these are true stories. They're all based on true stories. And it's just, I love having those memories of my kids and also being able to share it, not just with our family, but with the world, And I really want children to be able to see themselves in the books, no matter what ethnicity they are, because sometimes a lot of times children can feel unseen and unheard.
Especially today, right? I mean, where we're competing with phones and with tablets and with all this other stuff that, we didn't have to worry about that when we were kids. Thank goodness. I mean, I can't imagine trying to navigate it, back then, because would we have seen what the world went through as up close and personal? I don't know. Would that conversation have ever even happened with your son about driving had it not been on every phone or tablet or place on the internet back then? I don't know. And the comforting part to me, if there is a comforting part, is that we're having these conversations and we're having them in a very real way. Especially in the South. And we both live in the South, and it has its stigmas and it has its past. But there is something beautiful that I think comes from living down here, where these conversations take place between a black lady and a white guy on a radio show about writers and authors in Georgia. So, I mean, these are happening, right? And that to me is comforting in a lot of ways. Do you find that true, or is it the opposite for you?
No, that's one of my goals of writing the books, is to create conversations like these, exactly like these.
And then for
And
other
so,
writers who are listening, what's your advice on dealing with characters? And I'm listening to this because you and I've talked offline about a project that I'm working on. What's your advice for dealing with this? Not changing the narrative of the story, obviously, but in handling, especially if you're writing something that's historical, where there was a system in place that prevented some of these relationships. But how do you address that? And what's your advice to folks that are writing specifically about the South or about a situation where this might not be possible? What should they keep in mind?
I think just stay true to the story. I mean, sometimes my son like to say cringeworthy.
Yeah.
Sometimes events in history, nonfiction is cringeworthy, but at the same time, if you face that with love and honesty and empathy, you can work through any situation. And that's the same thing approach that I like to take to my writing, or just speaking about this topic. It's just, it's cringeworthy stuff at times, but at the same time, I know that there's people out there that are loving, kind, empathetic, right? That are not the same race as me. And they want to be informed, right? And they want to make a positive difference in the world. And so I just say, speak to that truth and, make sure that you're writing in a way where you're showing that truth, but you're also progressing, the idea of us being more loving and caring and accepting of each other together. You know what I'm saying? Progress that. Don't just show the truth, but what can we do about it? Or start conversations and stuff like that. Everything to work towards a positive goal.
Yeah, we're all in this together. I mean, nobody's getting out of here alive, so we might as well enjoy it while we're here. I mean, that's yeah, I hear that in what you're saying, and I think it's wonderful. Are you back employed now? That was my other question that I had written down here because all of this sort of came out of this really this like alternate world that we all found ourselves living in during COVID. Are you back at work now?
All right. So I did go back to work for a couple of years, but then last year, because of the impending recession, I was laid off. So my layoff last year jump-started everything. So I have not worked and I am not working since March the 30th of last year.
Something tells me that's not true. Something tells me you're working. You might not have a paycheck, but something tells me you're working, Shannon. So
but that is true. I don't have any paychecks coming in, but other than starting the book series, I also started my own publishing company so I can publish my books. So I'm self-published. And then I also have my own foundation that I started in 2010 called the Miles Singleton Foundation. And we do a variety of things like back to school supplies. We do anti-bullying events. We haven't done those since COVID, though, because of COVID, but we're going to start back up. We host a Thanksgiving dinner for battered women's shelter here in the metro Atlanta area. And we also provide Christmas to families in Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina.
God bless you for all your work and for what you're doing. I mean, it's a remarkable story. You were a program and project manager before all of this. I don't know, but for me, and this is maybe a little too personal, but for me, I've often told, the a very good friend who's a pastor, I said, I don't like quiet whispers on the wind from the Lord. I really would rather the Kool-Aid man sort of run through the wall and say, here it is, right? That's what I need. And in these moments that happen in my life where it's the Kool-Aid man running through the wall, and then I have to sort of get it. It sounds like I'm just hearing a little bit of similarity in how the Lord talks to you, that it's these huge changes. The breadcrumbs have been there, but it's uncomfortable to be a writer. It is uncomfortable to go out on your own and to do these big things that he's calling you to do. And I think it's noteworthy to say, thanks for answering the call, because you're doing that, and you're doing it in a big way.
Well, I appreciate it because you are so right. I'm asking the Lord every day. You sure I should get a full-time job?
Yeah. And then bam.
Right. And the
Guess
Kool-Aid
what?
man is still running around while I'm saying that, right?
Yeah. He's running around in the room. And you're like, I don't know. Yeah. I remember, I'll never forget, good old Father Ben walked into the kitchen one morning and the Kool-Aid man was standing there. And he hears this conversation I'm having on the phone, and he just kind of looks at me, and you'd have to know this guy. He looks just like Jack Black, the actor, and he's standing there and he's like sipping his coffee, and he goes, "Oh yeah," just like the Kool-Aid man, So yeah, I welcome it now. Bring it on, because sometimes it's the only way you could do it. Tell me in the last few moments here about the Atlanta Writers Club and your relationship, because for so many folks, it's been a big part of their writing journey. Let's talk about that in the last minute here.
Yeah, I can't say how wonderful George and Kim and everybody are at the Atlanta Writers Club. Like, every time I have a question, like, I email George, and within minutes he's getting back to me.
And this is George Weinstein, the executive director.
Yes,
also an author, by the way.
Yes, who's also an author, right? He has been, such a big help. And then other people, Jerry Weiner, that's also with Atlanta's Writers Club, my critique groups. I was in Roswell critique group, and I'm also in the indie critique group. Like, they're invaluable to me in helping me, because I before this, I didn't know anything about this. And so it's been wonderful. And I would encourage anybody that's thinking about writing to join the Atlanta's Writers Club.
That's great stuff. And I Rise Publishing, how can folks get a hold of your work, Shannon?
They can go to our website, irisepublishing.com. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and you got to excuse me. I'm not as big as a social media person as most people, so I don't know what my handles are.
Yeah, I hate all that stuff. But, if Cody Norris told me, who's a musician, he said, if you don't bounce your own ball, no one's going to do it for you, right? And I think about that time every time, you have to share something or whatever. It's just, I don't like doing it. But, yeah,
right.
We'll go find you. Shannon Singleton, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon.
Georgia Radio, on your phone, in your home, everywhere you go.